The note sat folded under the salt shaker for 3 minutes before she found it, and by then, the man who left it was already gone, and she had no idea that the single-dollar bill resting on top of it would turn out to be worth more than every paycheck she had earned that year. Her name was Nia Carter, and on a Tuesday night in late November, she was wiping down booth 7 at a diner called the Sunrise off Route 9. The kind of place that kept its lights on past midnight, so the truckers and the night shift nurses and the people with nowhere warm to go could have a cup of coffee and a place to sit. She was 34, she had been on her feet since 2 that afternoon, and she had 4 more hours to go, and her ankles had passed the point where they hurt and gone quiet, which was worse. Her son, Theo, was 9 years old and asleep on a cot in the manager's office in the back because the sitter had fallen through and there was nowhere else for him to be. That was the shape of Nia's life, that fall. She filled the cracks with whatever she had, and what she had was mostly herself. She had not always worked nights at a diner. She did not tell people that, because telling people felt like asking them to feel something, and she did not want anything from anybody. 2 years before, she had been a dental hygienist with a small apartment and a used car that ran and a calendar that did not frighten her. Then Theo got sick. Not the kind of sick that passes. The kind with a name and a specialist and a number at the bottom of every page. The car went first. Then the apartment got smaller, then it got gone, then it became the room she rented, now from a woman named Pearl who did not ask too many questions and charged what she could. Nia worked the diner because it paid cash some nights and because the manager let her bring Theo, and because when you are holding the whole weight of a child's life on 2 tired feet, you take the floor that lets you keep him close. She noticed the man before he sat down, the way she noticed everybody, because noticing was the job. He came in around 11 alone, an older man in a wool coat that had been good once and was still trying. He had a careful way of moving, like the floor might not hold him, and he took the booth in the corner where the heater worked best. And he set down a leather folder beside him and folded his hands and looked at the menu for a long time without seeming to read it. Nia brought him water and a coffee he had not yet asked for because he looked cold. And because that was simply what she did. "Thank you," he said. His voice was quiet and even. "That's kind. You let me know when you're ready," she said. "No rush. We're open till 2. She left him alone. That was a thing she understood that a lot of people in service did not. The gift of being left alone, the dignity of not being hovered over. She had spent 2 years on the receiving end of the opposite of people who watched her too closely in waiting rooms and pharmacies, who tracked her hands when she counted out coins, who softened their voices into the careful tone people use on those they have already decided are beneath them. And she had learned from being on that side exactly how it felt and exactly how not to do it to anyone else. So she refilled the chocolate at the counter and boxed up a slice of pie for a woman heading out into the cold and pressed 2 extra napkins into the bag without being asked, and she gave the man in the corner the thing she would have wanted in his place, which was room. When she came back around, he was watching her with an expression she could not place. Not the way men sometimes watched, something further back than that, something almost like grief. He ordered the meatloaf and ate about half of it and asked for more coffee twice. Between the refills, he opened the leather folder and took out a single sheet of paper and a pen. He wrote something slowly, the way a man writes when the words cost him, and he folded the paper into quarters and set it under the salt shaker. He left a $1 bill on top of it, then he counted out the exact price of the meal in worn bills, stood with effort, buttoned the wool coat to his chin, and walked out into the dark without looking back. He had been there almost 2 hours. Stay with me because the dollar he left was the smallest part of what he gave her, and Nia did not understand that yet either. When she cleared booth 7 and found the note, her first thought, honest and tired, was that a $1 tip on a 2-hour table was a slap, and she was too worn out to be hurt by it. She almost swept the folded paper into her apron pocket with the crumbs. Then she saw her own name on the outside fold, written in a careful, old-fashioned hand. Nia. Just her first name, the one stitched on her badge. She stood there in the empty diner, with the radio playing low and the coffee machine ticking as it cooled, and she unfolded the paper, and she read what the man in the wool coat had written, and then she went into the back, past the cot where her son slept, into the dry goods closet, where the boxes of napkins were stacked to the ceiling. And she closed the door and pressed her hand over her mouth, and she cried for 10 minutes without making a sound. She had not meant to cry. She had meant to read the thing and tuck it away and finish her side work, roll the silverware and salt the shakers and mop the front before Curtis locked the register. Standing in that closet with the smell of cardboard and cleaning vinegar around her, she had braced one hand against the stack of napkin boxes and felt her knees go uncertain, and the sob that came up out of her was so old and so deep that it frightened her a little. The way you can frighten yourself by finding out how much you have been carrying, only when you finally set it down. She bit down on the side of her own hand to keep the sound in, because Theo was 20 feet away on the cot and she would not wake him with it, and she would not have the other waitress hear and come asking. The crying was not sad. That was the strange part. It came from the same place sadness comes from, but it was the opposite of sad. The way the body weeps when a thing it had given up on arrives, anyway, late, against the odds, undeserved and exact. To understand why a grown woman wept in a closet over a folded note, you have to understand what the last 2 years had taken out of her and what the note gave back. Theo's illness had a long name and a longer treatment plan, and the part nobody warned you about is not the fear, though the fear is real. It is the arithmetic. It is sitting at a kitchen table that is not your kitchen table, doing math at 2 in the morning. Subtracting the rent from the tips and the tips from the medicine, and finding a number with a minus sign in front of it, and doing it again, slower, in case you were wrong, and finding the same number. She knew that number the way some people know a song. She knew the exact cost of his weekly medication down to the cents, $83 and change, and she knew what a good night in tips looked like and what a slow Tuesday looked like, and she knew the gap between them, and the gap was the whole shape of her life. It is the way a person learns to apologize with her eyes to a pharmacist she will never be able to fully pay. It is the slow education in being invisible, in watching people look through you because you are the one carrying their plates, in learning that the world has decided you are furniture, and in deciding every single day not to become what the world has decided you are. She had stood at a counter once with Theo's prescription and $40 and watched the pharmacist's face do the small kind arithmetic of pity, and she had said evenly that she would take half now and come back for the rest, and she had walked out with her back straight and cried in the car where the boy could not see. And the next morning she had gotten up and tied her apron and gone back to noticing strangers because that was who she had decided to be. And the deciding was the only thing in her whole life that nobody could repossess. Nia had decided that. She decided it again, every shift. She kept her uniform clean even when she had to wash it in the sink. She remembered her regulars' orders and asked after their kids. She left the lights on a little longer for the man who slept in his truck in the lot, because she knew his name was Walter, and she knew the truck was all he had. She did these things not because anyone saw, and not because she expected anything back, but because the alternative was to let the hard years sand her down into someone smaller, and her grandmother had raised her to believe that the soul keeps its own accounts, even when the bank does not. She did not feel like a good person most days. She felt like a tired person, and she kept choosing it anyway. And choosing it when you are that tired is its own kind of faith. The note changed nothing about her circumstances. The rent was still due Friday. Theo still had an appointment on the 4th that she did not know how to pay for. The dollar was still a dollar. And yet she carried that folded paper in the inside pocket of her coat for the rest of the week like a coal that would not go out, and more than once she took it out and read it again just to be sure she had not invented it, and each time the same warmth moved through her chest and each time her eyes stung. She read it on the bus on the way home that first night, holding it close so the man across the aisle could not see, her lips moving over the words. She read it standing at the sink at Pearl's the next morning while the coffee went cold. She read it once at 3 in the afternoon between shifts, with Theo doing his homework beside her, and he asked what she was looking at, and she said a letter from a friend, and he asked which friend, and she found she did not have a name to give and did not need one. What the man had written was not money. It was something money cannot buy and cannot replace, and Nia had not known, until she read it, how starved she had been for it. What the note said she did not tell anyone, not at first. She told Pearl only that a customer had left her something kind. She did not tell the other waitress, Renee, who would have wanted to read it, and she did not tell her manager, Curtis, who would have been gentle about it, and that would have undone her again. She kept it close. Some things are too important to spend on conversation. She went back to work the next night, changed in a way she could not have described, lighter by exactly the weight of having been seen, and she did not know that the man in the wool coat had not finished with her, and that he had not in fact left for good. He came back 4 nights later, same booth, same coat, same careful walk, a little more careful than before. Nia saw him from across the room and felt her face do something it had not done in a long time, which was to be glad. She brought him the coffee before he asked, and the water with no ice the way he liked, and she did not mention the note because she sensed he would not want her to, and she was right. "You came back," she said, setting the cup down. "I did," he said. "I find I sleep better the nights I come here." He looked up at her, and the grief she had seen the first time was still in his face. But there was something steadier under it now. "What's good tonight, Nia?" "The pot roast didn't dry out, which is a miracle," she said, and he almost smiled, and she felt absurdly proud to have nearly made him smile. His name, she learned that night, was Mr. Abbott. He told her that much, and not much more. He ate slowly, and he asked her, in the offhand way that careful people use to ask things that are not offhand at all, how long she had worked at the Sunrise, and whether the boy in the back was hers, and whether the nights were hard. She answered honestly because there was no reason not to. Yes, the boy was hers. Yes, the nights were hard, but they were hers. To be hard. She did not complain, and she did not perform her struggle, and Mr. Mordaunt Abbott listened with the full attention of a man who had spent a long time around people who told him only what they thought he wanted to hear, and was not used to the plain truth, and found it nourishing. While they talked, door chimed and Walter came in off the lot, stamping the cold out of his boots, and Nia broke off mid-sentence to pour him the coffee he never asked for and never paid for, and set it at his usual stool, without a word passing between them, the way you do for someone whose pride you have learned to protect. Mr. Abbott watched the whole small transaction over the rim of his cup. He watched her warm Walter's cup a second time on her way back, and slide a wrapped roll onto the saucer like it had always been part of the order, and he watched Walter nod once, a small, hard nod that cost the old trucker something, and he understood that he was seeing the thing the note had been about happening again in front of him. When she did not know anyone of consequence was looking, he said nothing. He filed it away. Some men keep ledgers in their heads their whole lives and never tell you what is written there until the day they pay it out. "You do that for everyone?" he asked when she came back. "I do it for Walter," she said. "Walter sleeps in the lot. There's a difference between a customer and a person you keep an eye on." She refilled Mr. Abbott's cup. "You looked cold the first night. That's the only reason you got coffee you didn't order. Don't go thinking you're special." That time he did smile, fully, the grief lifting off his face for the length of it, and she would remember later that it was the first time she had seen him do it, and that she had been the one who made it happen, and that she had not known, doing it, that she was warming the heart of a man who could rebuild her whole life with a phone call. What Nia did not know was that Mr. Ding Abbott had buried his wife 11 months before, and that for 41 years she had been the one who remembered the waitress's name, who pressed the extra napkins, who left the lights on a little longer, who saw the people the world had decided were furniture. Her name had been Ruth. She had grown up poor in a town that no longer existed on most maps, and she had never once let the money they came into later change the way she looked at a person carrying a tray. And Mr. Abbott had loved her for many things over 41 years, and most of all for that, for the way she could walk into any room in the world and find the one person nobody else was seeing and make them feel, for the length of a conversation, like the most important soul in it. What Nia did not know was that since the funeral, Mr. Abbott had been driving the county at night, unable to sleep in the house they had shared, stopping at diners and gas stations and all-night places, looking for, he could not have said what, looking for some proof that the kind of goodness his wife had carried had not gone out of the world when she did. He had stopped at a dozen places. He had been waited on by people who were efficient, and people who were rude, and people who were simply absent behind their own exhaustion. A girl who took his order without once meeting his eyes, a man who set his plate down hard and walked off before he could ask for anything. A whole chain of small indifferences that he did not blame anyone for and that nonetheless emptied him a little more each time. He had left every one of those places a little more certain that the thing he was looking for did not exist anymore, that it had been rare even when Ruth was alive, and that with her gone it had simply ended. Then he had walked into the sunrise off Route 9 on a cold Tuesday night, and a tired woman had brought him a coffee he had not asked for because he looked cold, and had left him alone with his grief because she understood that some kindness is the kindness of distance. And something in his chest that had been clenched for 11 months had loosened by a single degree. That was why he wrote the note. And what Nia did not know, what she could not have guessed, was who Mr. Abbott had been before he was a widower driving the dark, and how much it was in his power to change a life. The weeks that followed were the hardest of that whole hard year, and the note could not stop them. The appointment on the 4th came, and Nia took Theo on 2 buses across town and sat in the waiting room with her coat folded in her lap and the note in its inside pocket, and the doctor was kind and the news was not bad, which after 2 years she had learned to count as good. The bill that followed was a number with too many digits, and the letter that came after the bill used words like final and collections, and Nia sat at Pearl's kitchen table at 2 in the morning doing the arithmetic again and finding the same minus sign she always found. She did not cry that night. She had cried in the closet, and that had been for something good. She would not spend her tears on a number. She made a list instead. She would pick up the Sunday lunch shift. She would ask Curtis about the catering overflow. She would sell the one thing she had left of value, which was her grandmother's wedding ring, a thin gold band she had carried through every move because selling it had always felt like selling the last of where she came from. She decided she would do it Monday. She put the ring on the table where she would see it, and she went to bed. She did not sell it Monday, because Monday is when everything turned, though it did not announce itself as a turning. It announced itself as Renee, pulling in sick, and the lunch rush hitting hard, and a party of 6 coming in at 1 o'clock and asking for Nia by name. She had been 3 hours on the floor already, her order pad damp in her apron pocket, when Curtis caught her by the pass and said there was a table that wanted her specifically. Table by the window, a party of 6 looked like money. She wiped her hands on her apron and went out, and she did not recognize the man at the head of the table at first, because she had only ever seen Mr. Stenner. Abbott alone and tired in a wool coat, and the man at the head of the table was in a pressed shirt with his collar back, flanked by people in good suits who deferred to him in the small ways that tell you everything about who holds the room. The way the youngest one half rose when he spoke, the way the others waited to order until he had. Then he looked up, and the grief was still there, just quieter, and she knew him. "Mr. Abbott," she said. "Nia," he said. "I hoped you'd be on today. These are my children, and the 2 on the end are from my company. I asked them to meet me here because I wanted them to see the place." He paused. "And the person who reminded me of their mother." The table went quiet, in the way tables do when something real has been said in a room built for small talk. Nia stood with her order pad and did not know what to do with her face. One of the daughters, a woman about Nia's age with her father's careful eyes, was looking at Nia with open emotion, like she had heard about her before, like Nia was someone in a story she already knew. The woman's hand had stopped halfway to her water glass and stayed there. The 2 from the company looked at the worn vinyl booths and the laminated menus, and then at the woman in the apron their employer had driven them across the county to meet, and they were trying to make their faces polite and not quite managing it because they had expected something and gotten something else. And the something else was a tired waitress with a name badge who poured a stranger's coffee for free. What Nia learned over the next hour in pieces between bringing out plates and refilling glasses was the thing the note had only hinted at. Mr. Abbott was not a man passing through on bad luck. Mr. Pulse. Abbott had built, over 40 years, one of the largest regional medical supply companies in 3 states. the kind of company whose name was on the boxes in the very clinics where Theo had been treated, though Nia would not put that together until later, and it would knock the wind out of her when she did. She would be standing in Theo's room weeks afterward, putting away a box of supplies the home nurse had left, and she would turn the box to read the side of it the way you read anything when your hands are busy and your mind is wandering, and she would see the name, his name, the name from booth 7, printed plain on the cardboard, and she would have to sit down on the edge of the bed. All those months, all those boxes. His company had been in the room with her son the whole time, and she had been carrying the man himself a coffee. Because he looked cold, neither of them knowing the thread that already ran between them, he had stepped back from running the company after his wife died, handed the day to his children, and gone driving in the dark, looking for a reason to come back to the world. He had found it, he told his children plainly, at booth 7. In a woman who had nothing, and gave anyway. None of that was the gift, though, and Nia would have told you so. The gift had come in the note 4 weeks earlier. And the note had not mentioned a company or a fortune. It had said something simpler and larger than either. Stay with me, because here is what the man in the wool coat had written in his careful old-fashioned hand on a single sheet of paper folded into quarters under a $1 bill. He had written, "I have eaten in fine rooms all over this country, served by people paid to smile at me, and tonight a stranger, who has every reason to be hard, brought me a coffee I did not ask for because I looked cold, and left me alone with my grief because she understood it without being told. My wife did that. She is gone 11 months, and I have been looking for her in every face since, and finding no one until tonight. I do not know your troubles, but I see that you carry them without letting them make you cruel, and that is the rarest and most valuable thing a person can do, and someone should have told you so a long time ago. I am leaving you $1, because a large tip would insult what you gave me by making it a transaction. The dollar is, so you will remember that the smallest thing, given honestly, is sometimes the thing that saves a man's life. You may have saved mine tonight. Thank you for seeing me. Someone is still seeing you." That was the note. That was what had sent her into the closet. After 2 years of being looked through, a stranger had looked at her and written down in his own hand that what she was doing in the dark when no one was watching was the rarest thing a person could do. Nobody had said that to her since her grandmother died. She had not known she was still waiting to hear it. She had not even known the waiting had a shape until the words filled it. The dollar she would keep forever. The words she had already memorized, and she would carry them for the rest of her life, the way you carry the one thing somebody said to you that turned out to be true. So when Mr. Beard, Abbott over the pot roast on that Monday afternoon, began gently to talk about what came next, Nia's first instinct was to refuse, because she had not done any of it for this, and she was afraid that taking anything would turn the note into the transaction he had so carefully kept it from being. He saw the refusal forming, and he held up one hand, not to silence her, but to ask for a moment. "I'm not paying you for what you did," he said. "What you did can't be paid for, and you'd be right to throw me out if I tried. I'm asking for something else. I'm an old man with a company I no longer want to run, and children who run it better than I did, and one thing I have left that I'm good at is recognizing a person worth investing in. That's all this is. I have spent my life around people who climb. You are someone who stays human at the bottom of the ladder, and I would rather put my weight behind one of you than 100 of them." He did not hand her a check at the table. That was not his way, and it would have been the wrong shake for the moment, and his late wife would have told him so. What he did instead, over the following weeks, was quieter and far larger. He learned, through his daughter, the name of the clinic and the size of the bill, and he settled it, all of it. Not as charity, but as a correction of an arithmetic that had always been unjust. Nia found out the way she found out everything that season, sideways and after the fact when she called the billing office to set up the payment plan she could not afford, and the woman on the phone went quiet and then said the balance showed paid in full. And Nia said that was a mistake. And the woman checked again and said it was not a mistake. And Nia sat down on the floor of the apartment with a phone still at her ear and her hand pressed flat against her chest as if to keep her heart inside it. He learned that Nia had once been a dental hygienist and that she had let her license lapse during the worst of Theo's treatment because there had not been time or money to keep it current, and he arranged, again through his daughter, for the fees and the coursework to be covered so she could get it back, because he believed, he said, that a person should be given the tools and then be left to build with them. He did not buy her a house. He did something she would later say was wiser. He consigned a small loan on a small apartment, a real one, with a bedroom for Theo and a window that faced east, and he made sure the terms were ones she could actually carry, so that the place would be hers, paid by her own work, and not a thing she had been handed and could lose. The dignity of earning it was the point. He understood that the way only a man who had earned his own way could. The day she signed the lease, she stood in the empty front room with the afternoon coming gold through the east window and Theo running from room to room claiming each one, and she took her grandmother's wedding ring out of her coat pocket, where it had ridden since the night she had laid it on Pearl's table to sell, and she slid it back onto her own finger, where it belonged, where it would stay. She had not had to sell the last of where she came from, after all. She got to keep it, and the morning, and the boy, and the ring. And Theo, Mr. Abbott met Theo on a Saturday at the new apartment, the boy thin from his long fight but bright-eyed and getting stronger, and the two of them sat at the kitchen table, and Mr. Chaff Abbott showed him how to fold a paper airplane the way his own son had folded them 40 years before, sharp creases, pressed flat with a thumbnail, wings bent down just so at the very tips. Theo got it wrong twice, and the old man did not do it for him, only showed him again, patient, until the third one flew clean across the room and banked into the wall, and Theo laughed, really laughed, the open, helpless laugh of a child who has not had much to laugh about and is making up for it all at once. Nia stood at the counter with a dish towel pressed to her mouth, and it was the closet all over again, except this time the door was open and the light was on, and her son was laughing in a kitchen that faced the morning. There was a daughter, Camille, the one who had looked at Nia like she already knew her, and she did, in a way. She came to the sunrise alone one afternoon, a week after the lunch, sat in booth 7 on purpose and waited for Nia to have a quiet minute, and then she took a small worn notebook out of her bag and set it on the table between them. She told Nia that her mother had kept it, a record of the people she met who carried grace through hard places, waitresses and bus drivers and night nurses, and the man who ploughed their road names and small acts written down in Ruth's slanting hand across years. She had written in it near the end, when she was already sick, that she worried the world was running out of such people, that she did not see them as often as she once had, and that this frightened her more than the diagnosis did. "My father read that page after she died," Camille said, turning the notebook so Nia could see the writing without quite letting her hold it. He read it over and over. "I think he decided to go looking to prove it or disprove it. I'm not sure which he was more afraid of." Her voice caught. "You proved her wrong. Do you understand what you did? You proved to my father that she was wrong about the only thing she was ever wrong about. He came home. He's been gone since she died. Even when he was sitting right across from us, he was gone, and you brought him home." Nia did not have a word for what that was worth. There is no word. She kept working at the Sunrise for a while, even after the bill was paid and the coursework began, because the Sunrise had kept her son close when nothing else would, and because Curtis had let her bring Theo, and because Walter still slept in his truck in the lot, and somebody had to leave the lights on. She was not a woman who walked away from the people who had carried her just because she could finally stand. The nights got shorter, though, and the math at the kitchen table started coming out without a minus sign, and one evening in the spring, she hung up her apron for the last time and Renee cried, and Curtis pretended he had something in his eye, and she walked out into a lot where her own car, a used one that ran, was parked under a streetlight, and Theo was in the back seat doing homework, and she drove home to an apartment that faced the morning. She got her license back that summer. She works days now in a clean office with good light, and she is home in the evenings, and on the wall by the door, in a small frame she bought at a thrift store and cleaned with her own hands, hangs a single $1 bill. Beside it, in the same frame, folded and unfolded so many times the creases have gone soft as cloth, is the note. Theo asked her once why she framed $1, standing on his toes to look at it, and she told him it was the most money anyone had ever given her, and he was 9 and did not understand, and he frowned at the math of it and asked how $1 could be the most, and she crouched down to his level and told him that someday a person would see him, really see him, when he was tired and at the bottom of something and certain that nobody was looking, and that when that happened, he would understand what the dollar was worth, and he will. Mr. Abbott comes to dinner the first Sunday of every month, is older now, and he moves more carefully than ever, and he still wears the wool coat which Nia has offered to replace, and which he will not give up. He and Theo fold paper airplanes off the east-facing window, and time, how long they stay up. He has never once mentioned the company or the bill or the license or the loan, and Nia has learned not to thank him for them anymore because she finally understands that thanking him for those things misses what he came for, the same way a large tip would have. What he came for is the chair at her table on the first Sunday of the month, and the boys' laughter and the proof, renewed each time, that his wife was wrong about the only thing she was ever wrong about. Kindness keeps a longer memory than the people who give it ever expect. Nia had given hers away for free, in the dark, to a cold stranger, asking nothing, believing no one was keeping count. Someone was. Someone is always keeping count, even when the bank does not, even when the world looks through you, even when you are wiping down booth 7 at midnight with your son asleep on a cot in the back and a minus sign waiting at the kitchen table. The smallest thing given honestly is sometimes the thing that saves a life. Sometimes it saves 2. Sometimes the cold stranger you brought a coffee to is the one who has been sent, though neither of you will use that word, to bring you in out of the dark. You did not know you were still standing in. If you have ever given something to a stranger and never found out where it landed, I hope this finds you the way that note found her. And if a story like this one settled something in you tonight, there is another I want to tell you. About a man who walked 6 miles in the snow to return a wallet that was not his, and the door it opened that he never expected to knock on. The frame still hangs by the door, the dollar has not lost a cent of its value, Walter sleeps indoors now, in a room of his own. Mr. Abbott heard his name from Nia one Sunday and asked a quiet question or two, the way he did, and a few weeks later the old trucker had a key and a door that locked and a place that was warm, and nobody made a speech about it. On the first Sunday of every month, a careful old man in a good wool coat climbs the stairs to a small apartment that faces the morning, and a boy meets him at the door with a sheet of paper already folded into wings. And a woman who was once invisible sets a 4th place at a table she paid for herself. Nobody there has to be told that they have been seen.